The walls are closing in. The walls are closing in around Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and this time President Trump is not going to back down.
And Biden was there with them, and Comey was there, and Clapper, the whole group was there.
They had a big meeting about it, and the next day, the situation with the Russian narrative changed dramatically. It changed in a way to support the accusations against Russia, which later undermined Donald J. Trump's entire first term.
America is shaken. New information about Barack's involvement, the idiotic response from his representative, Hillary's silence. All of this makes the atmosphere literally explosive. There is still no reaction from the heads of state. At the same time, August 1st is approaching. If you remember, America is shaken over the tariffs. If it's not allowed, then for at least the next year, you'll be charged as much as we feel like. Now, trillions are going to Pennsylvania. Why there exactly? The world is in the process of being reshaped. Let's talk about the main events of today. All the topics, as Vladimir Vladimirovich Lenin used to say, are extremely interesting and intense. Trump wanted to start, as I understand it, digging into Obama's case after August 1st, once he finished dealing with the issue called trade agreements. But all sorts of events happened, like a kind of rebellion of the magicians over Epstein. So they started airing all this dirty laundry 2, maybe even 3 weeks earlier than they had planned. For various crimes, there is what's called a statute of limitations under the law. Kash Patel and Pam Bandy decided not to handle the case as individual abuses of power, election interference, and so on. The statute of limitations for participation in which expires in 2025. But conspiracy has a 10-year statute of limitations, so there's still a long time left. That's why you keep hearing the word conspiracy, conspiracy, conspiracy everywhere, as they say, and it really was a conspiracy. By the way, at first it was Hillary who was in charge before she went on a deep bender, and then Barack or Barack.
The walls are closing in around Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And this time, President Trump is not going to back down. He has all the political capital to see this through to a stunning conclusion.
Stay with us. By the end of this video, you'll see that the main point isn't even about emails, servers, or personal enrichment. The issue is broader, deeper, and will require Herculean efforts from the Trump administration to address it. And the artillery, ladies and gentlemen, will also be firing at its own. Remember this, because it won't just be the Democrats who get stained, but the Republicans as well. Are you interested now in why they absolutely had to get rid of Trump? Honestly, it all started because of Trump. Questions and answers to questions. A truly Herculean cleaning of Washington's stables. This, gentlemen, this is the first stage. There will be a second. There will be a second.
Let's start with the recently declassified documents just published by Senator Chuck Grassley. They go much deeper than anything the mainstream media want you to know. Grassley has just released a 31-page set of documents called the Clinton Appendix. These are documents that have been kept secret since 2018. Now they are declassified, and here's what's in them. Now we know that the FBI cleared Hillary without any real investigation. So, under James Comey, the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a personal email server for handling top-secret documents was a complete sham. It was never conducted. There was no investigation. They officially cleared Hillary regarding her personal email server in a written letter even before the investigation began, which again never actually took place. Why investigate if you've already cleared her, right? Now it's confirmed. But what's especially interesting here is that now we know these correspondences included messages with then President Barack Obama.
That is Hillary and Obama. They failed. They couldn't erase the information from the servers and drives so that it would disappear forever. But it didn't work. After all, the first law of thermodynamics works. Nothing disappears without a trace.
Now we know that Clinton deliberately destroyed evidence. Clinton's team destroyed a number of incriminating phones and private servers. And of course, there is evidence that these devices contained state secrets hidden from the public.
Attention, protected.
From proper investigation and also contained correspondence with Barack Obama, it seems that Obama was also involved in all of this. Initially, Obama stated that he learned about Hillary's private server only from the news, but now we know that he was actually exchanging emails with Clinton while she was using her private server.
That is, the President of the United States was communicating with the Secretary of State, bypassing all the security measures that were put in place so that, as they say, enemies wouldn't eavesdrop. But since Obama and Hillary considered people like us to be the enemies, the main thing for them was to make sure their communication didn't go through official channels where everything is recorded and stored, but through channels hidden from us.
That's why Comey and that corrupt FBI agent Peter Strzok didn't get involved in this. Because a thorough FBI investigation would have affected not only Hillary, but Barack Obama would have been implicated too, because he would have been caught lying. And he knew that Hillary was using her personal email server for government business. They exchanged emails while Hillary was using that server. Considering that he lied about his knowledge of this, a real investigation would have been a huge embarrassment, if not a full-blown scandal for the White House.
The laws were made by our elected officials, written not for them, but for us, for the rednecks out there. The rednecks and the redhorns. But that's not all, and it's not the most important thing. They live on Olympus like the secretaries of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union Central Committee used to, behind high fences and living a different life.
The Trump administration claims that this network of cover-ups, coincidences, and concealment of evidence is not incompetence. It's deliberate, organized, and entirely aimed at undermining the electorate. Now we know, based on official emails, intelligence agency memos, and eyewitness testimony, that when President Obama left office, he and his top officials were told that there was no evidence of collusion with Russia or interference in the 2016 election. But instead of accepting this intelligence, which, by the way, came from all his intelligence agencies, CIA, FBI, National Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security, all of them came to the same conclusion. Despite this, the White House tried to hide this assessment and promoted another version, a false, fabricated story that Trump was compromised by Russia.
This was the biggest conspiracy in history of one United States president against another.
Clinton's campaign secretly funded the infamous Steele dossier and hid these expenses by disguising them as legal services through the law firm Perkins Coie. This way, expenses can be hidden through a law firm by using the loophole of attorney-client privilege. Clinton fabricated evidence, and then senior Obama aides and company lawyers spread unproven
Stories like these
as the connection with Alpha Bank, even though they knew their sources were completely unreliable. The FBI continued and even intensified the investigation against Trump, even though key evidence had been debunked. And then while all this corruption was happening, what's even worse, all the major media outlets deliberately ignored or dismissed these revelations, even as new criminal cases and questions from Congress emerged. So, whether someone considers this actual treason or not, it's clearly perjury, obstruction of justice, and an attempt to undermine the authority of a legitimately elected president.
I believe this is a classic case of treason against the homeland, but maybe it's called something different in American law. That doesn't change the scale of the vileness and treachery. Rasmussen conducted an urgent survey of the attitudes of United States citizens, those who vote, those who pay taxes. What do they actually think about?
What's happening? So, Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Polling finds that more and more voters are demanding a real investigation. Why Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were protected from consequences, while President Trump and his allies were dragged into endless show trials. Seriously, just think about that. We are witnessing a battle for the soul of our judicial system. The entire federal system went out of its way to protect Clinton and Obama while they were literally fabricating fake evidence to overthrow
Trump. This
is literally the very definition of a banana republic.
And now Maria Bratarum from Fox Business, who is becoming a rising journalism star in America. And what happened, says Maria, makes Watergate look like child's play, like a game with candy wrappers.
And we kick it off with the hot topic of the hour. Former President Barack Obama broke his silence regarding all the accusations from President Trump that he and his administration were behind the lies about Trump's collusion with Russia. In a rare public statement, a representative of former President Barack Obama says the following: "Our office usually does not dignify the constant stream of nonsense and misinformation coming from the White House with a response. But these statements are so outrageous that they deserve a response." There is nothing in the document released last week that contradicts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia tried to influence the presidential election of 2016, but it was not able to successfully manipulate the votes. President Trump says that Obama should be the main target of the Justice Department's investigation, along with a group of former high-ranking officials who were also involved.
It was former President of the United States, Obama. He started this.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told me on Sunday that new documents would emerge, and they are coming out today. They contradict Obama's statement. Joining us is former federal prosecutor, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, Jonathan Fahey. Jonathan, glad to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, everyone on this program and our audience know that we have exposed this fraud from the very beginning. I've been pointing this out for years. What is your reaction now that we see the publication of these declassified documents which confirm what we all expected?
Yes, it's quite astonishing, and the fact that new information keeps coming out even now is also striking. It's amazing that it took so much time, but actually it shows that the establishment, the apparatus, and the Democratic Party did everything possible to undermine Donald Trump's candidacy as well as his presidency. And, you know, President Trump talked about the Steele dossier, which was the trigger for all of this and which was paid for by the Clinton company. And remember, they listed it as legal expenses. Then when Donald Trump lists something as legal expenses, it becomes grounds for a massive investigation. All of this looks suspicious. And interestingly, in Obama's statement, he doesn't address the fact that the Democrats built their 2018 campaign on this, including himself when he talked about Russian interference and how important it is to protect our elections, even though they knew that the Russians did nothing or nothing more than what usually happens in elections. But they wanted people to think that the Russians not only interfered, but also changed the voting results and things like that, even though they never had any evidence of that.
We got so caught up in these events that we lost sight of the United States' trade deals with the world. The 1st of August is approaching, and with it comes Trump's decision on tariffs for goods from the countries that either decided not to make a deal with us or just can't come to an agreement. Trump announced an agreement was reached with Japan today. That's what Trump wrote. The biggest deal in history. So what's the change? The change compared to what was before today? First, Japan allows the United States to import trucks, cars, agricultural products such as rice, for example. Japan agreed to invest $500 in a project on United States territory.
$50 billion.
We'll discuss this later. And when importing its goods, Japonia will pay 15% customs duties and only 10% on cars. Since Trump said America really loves Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, which is true. Investments made by Japanese companies in the United States and the opportunity to export additional goods to Japan will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, Trump said. Japan's ruling party lost popularity because it couldn't reach an agreement with Trump. He said that if we don't reach an agreement by August 1st, a 25% tariff will be imposed on all Japanese goods. That's when Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and others got scared. And when they get scared, the ruling parties lose seats. Representatives of the European Union are going to meet with Trump on Wednesday. Trump scared the union of 27 countries. He announced that starting August 1st, he would impose a 30% tariff on all their goods. Either he signs trade agreements with them, you choose. Either we sign or it's 30% on all goods. The problem with Europe, unlike Japan, Indonesia, and other countries, is that they have 27 members in the community, each with completely different ideas about what to allow the United States to import and what not to tax. The next agreement will be signed with Indonesia, but some details are already known. That is, it's ready, it's just going through some kind of, I think, legal review right now. First of all, 99% of United States exports to Indonesia will be imported duty-free, and the numerous bans that were imposed on goods made in the United States will be lifted, not only in the United States but in general. But now, so to speak, not all of them, as they say. I don't know what remains and what doesn't. But in any case, it means that now we'll be able to import practically anything we want. Now, because of this, Trump is lowering the announced 32% on goods from Indonesia. So he said 32%, but now it's like with a discount, we have a 50% discount, but what is the discount for? But we just made up the price yesterday. So Trump just made up 32% on goods from Indonesia yesterday, and now he lowered it to 19%. Indonesia also agrees to supply the United States with minerals, rare earth metals, and has committed to buying agricultural products, energy resources, and airplanes from the United States. By the way, this is a positive development for Boeing and for us. This is a huge deal for our automakers, tech companies, farmers, and machine tool manufacturers. Trump told us all this in his Truth Social post. The United States will also supply Indonesia with digital technologies. So basically, the United States will start, beginning this year or next year, importing $50 billion worth of goods annually. But perhaps most importantly, Indonesia is refusing to make secret agreements with China to import Chinese goods into the United States under the Indonesian label. If it turns out that Indonesia continues this game, importing something, well, let's say as long as it's within the agreed percentage of parts, a certain amount is allowed. If the product contains a higher percentage than allowed of certain Chinese parts, Chinese components, and so on, then if this is discovered, Indonesia's products will be required to pay not 19, as we already mentioned, but 40% on everything they export. It's a minor penalty that, in theory, should stop them. Another blow to China is the United States agreement with the Philippines. The country agreed not to charge customs duties on United States goods. Actually, imported goods from the Philippines are subject to 19% duties. I think this is the price for our promise to protect the Philippines from their aggressive neighbor. China did not express enthusiasm about the United States agreements with India, Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Japan. All these countries are in close proximity to China, and they all want protection from an overseas partner against China's growing ambitions. Financial upheavals are happening inside China, and by getting involved in a trade war with Trump, Xi Jinping was practically stripped of his power because the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party set up a committee to oversee the country's trade and military policy by the security agencies. That is, in reality, they tied his hands and feet, depriving him of the power he once had. Scott Bessent, who is leading the negotiations with China, said that after the changes at the top, he is not sure which negotiations became more successful and, in his words, reached new levels. Again, we don't know what that means, but at least something positive seems to be happening. I think that the main problem for China today is the American intention to impose secondary sanctions on Russian and Iranian oil. The second thing Bessent is trying to achieve is to shift China to an economy that serves its own population rather than, as someone nicely put it, a billion-person labor camp producing goods for external consumption. For small countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, we set a tariff of 10%, which is the minimum we charge at all. But actually, the main news isn't there. What I told you is that very interesting, exciting, and emotional events are happening for us. But the main events are happening right now in the state of Pennsylvania, which the Trump administration decided to turn
into a global
center of artificial intelligence with trillion-dollar investments, powerful energy resources, and a concentration of all the world's giants. Let's listen to the same, Maria.
Last week on this program, I spoke with the chief executive officer and asked him to assess the situation. And here's what he said. Take a look at this.
I've never encountered a cycle where the strength of demand in society was on the scale that we're seeing now.
That is, everyone, absolutely everyone, wants to use artificial intelligence. There's never been anything new that everyone wanted to use like this before. There was a boom with railroads, but it wasn't like this. There was a boom with oil, but it wasn't even close. With computers and the internet, it was never like this.
Businesses need to get it, scientists need to get it, governments need to get it. There is an understanding that this technology will be defining for the next stage of human development. And with this understanding, companies around the world, and in fact there aren't that many companies that can effectively create and operate this equipment, are facing enormous demand. And, these are hyperscalers and a few other companies that are truly capable of providing such solutions on a large scale. And one of the things that people really need to understand is
Pittsburgh will become a center for artificial intelligence because they have the energy, they have the resources, they have the necessary knowledge. Thanks to excellent universities, companies from all over the world want to come here. You mentioned it, and I can tell you that we are about to announce a series of trade deals in the coming days, and many of these deals will include significant investments in the United States, whether it's automobiles, semiconductors, or pharmaceuticals.
The United States boomed from tax reform, tariffs, and things like that. Because new technologies are coming in, completely new, absolutely cutting edge. And our government doesn't stand in their way, but on the contrary, encourages development and investment, both domestic and foreign. This makes the United States a land of milk and honey, just like we were 150 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make America great again. These are not just words. Well, here comes the cherry on top.
Go back to December of 2016. Let's go back to December 2016. Barack Obama, power president. But Trump has already won the election and is about to take office as president in January. And they planned, the intelligence officers under Barack Obama planned. Much of this is from Rocket News, which all should read directly. This is Matt's team. The intelligence officers planned the presidential daily briefing for December 9, 2016, which is always prepared by the intelligence community for the president to inform him about what is happening in the world. They prepared a briefing stating that foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to change the outcome of the United States presidential election. And they were also going to state that they had no evidence of cyber manipulation of election infrastructure with the goal of changing the results. That's the key message people need to understand. Obama's intelligence community was going to provide Obama with a presidential daily briefing that completely rejected, downplayed, and diminished. Pick any word. The idea that Russia interfered in any significant way in the 2016 presidential election, that's true. And by the way, Matt went much further than just statements about manipulation of the electoral infrastructure. And he pointed out that if you look at what the intelligence community was saying, it went far beyond simply denying attacks on our electoral infrastructure. They had doubts in every area about whether Russia did anything more in 2016 than ever before. Namely, just attempts to create a threat and sow a little chaos. And now the declassified Tulsi and intelligence reports confirm this. So while Andy and others are focusing on the idea that before meeting with Obama, they were going to tell him there had been no attempts to hack our electoral infrastructure. And later, Andy will claim that their subsequent statement, there were many attempts to interfere in the election, all in favor of Donald Trump, which is entirely different. He says that's comparing apples and oranges. Jim Hames, as you mentioned in Rocket News, also says that's comparing apples and oranges. There's nothing sensational in Tulsi's revelations about what was supposed to happen next. Because nothing that happened afterward contradicts the fact that they weren't trying to hack our voter databases.
If that day Obama had just listened to what he was told, as usual, there wouldn't have been Mueller, there wouldn't have been 4 years of hysteria, there wouldn't have been 2 impeachments, and the country would have lived a normal life.
At that point, a meeting was held. And at that moment, a meeting was held. It was scheduled and conducted with all the key people from Obama's team, every single one of them. They held a big meeting about this. And already the next day, the situation with the narrative about Russia changed dramatically. And it changed in a way to support the accusations of Russia, 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 which later undermined Donald J's entire first term. Trump. And Matt will help us lay out this whole story in detail. Matt claims, and I agree with him, he convinced me too, that it wasn't just about swapping apples for oranges. You know, as if before and after that key meeting, they were just pointing at apples and then at oranges. They kept saying, there are no apples, there are no apples, there are no apples. But after that meeting, they changed their position and said, there are plenty of apples. We're right in the orchard. They're everywhere. All we see are apples.
I hope it's clear to you, Obama didn't tell the intelligence agencies. Let's check if Russia really didn't interfere there. At that meeting, it was decided to deceive the country, completely falsifying and altering the facts. Listen to this very combative editor. So, in my opinion, Talibi Taibi, like this, yes?
Mark Taibi. If you remember, before the elections, for example, there was an article published on October 31st, which said that the FBI saw no connection between Russia and Trump, as well as the elections. That was basically what officials were telling members of the media. There were some marginal attempts to introduce the Steele dossier materials, this whole conspiracy theory about Trump's collusion with Russia, into the media. But for the most part, they were unsuccessful. After the election, everything remained the same until December 9, 2016, when Barack Obama convened that meeting and ordered a new intelligence assessment. And immediately that same night, there were leaks from the administration stating that there had been Russian interference specifically aimed at helping Donald Trump. You can see that on December 9, an order came from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which basically gave instructions on how to prepare a new intelligence community assessment at the president's request. But for now, they're just giving this assignment. The homework has already been published in the New York Times and the Washington Post. In other words, they haven't even started working on this assessment yet, haven't begun collaborating, but they've already told everyone in the media what the conclusion will be. So the whole working process was essentially a fiction. Basically, they decided in advance what would be in this assessment and started leaking information ahead of time.
So the investigation. Russia did not interfere. The decision was to deceive the country. Even before they rewrote the report, they started leaking supposed details from it to the press around January 5th or 6th. Details about Trump's alleged crimes. The country was being fed with a document that hadn't even been forged yet.
It seems that this was done on the orders of the President of the United States at the time, Barack Obama.
And this is Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura. She is the co-chair of the Republican Party of the United States and an architect. Security on Election Day, before the voting, after the voting, security at the polling stations. Thousands of lawyers. She organized tens of thousands of volunteers. 24 hours of filming, ballot stuffing was thrown into the police. This was done under her leadership.
Director Gabbard, give me your response to what we just heard from former President Obama. He says that none of this makes sense, that it's just a distraction. What do you say to that?
This is the art of distraction, coming both from former President Obama and from his friends who are still in Congress, and Senator Warner and Congressman Jim Himes. In fact, they all say pretty much the same thing, which doesn't address the essence of the issue that was detailed in more than 100 documents we released last week, and in the documents we will release later this week. All of this points to the undeniable fact that you mentioned in the introduction to this segment. The intelligence community concluded that Russia had neither the intention nor the capability to try to influence the outcome of the United States elections on the eve of Election Day. The same conclusion was reached after Donald Trump was elected president by the American people in 2016, defeating Hillary Clinton. And only after that very document, the President's Daily Brief, which you mentioned was seized, was the Committee of Principals convened at the National Security Council. And President Obama then instructed his then Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, to lead the effort to create a new assessment by the intelligence community, which examined in detail not whether Moscow tried to influence the outcome of the United States elections, but how exactly it did so. So here's what I think people should pay attention to. Neither the statements from President Obama's office, nor the statements from Democrats in Congress today, nor their friends in the propaganda media. None of them are paying attention to the fact that there has been a complete 180-degree turnaround. The intelligence community's assessment before the election and the one President Obama ordered after Donald Trump's victory completely contradicted each other. The second point I want to touch on, and which is very important, Lara, is that in the clip you showed, you saw how John Brennan, James Clapper, and James Comey spoke with great confidence about that January intelligence community assessment, which they prepared at President Obama's direction. In fact, they used information that had already been debunked, such as the Steele dossier. They knew that this information had already been debunked, but they still used it as a source for that document, claiming that they fully trusted it. They used intelligence that some of these professionals in the intelligence community had previously rejected due to a lack of credibility and the inability to verify whether this information was accurate and could be used for assessment. There is a long list of facts and intelligence reports that directly contradict the statement coming from President Obama's office, as well as those who are trying to distract from what really happened. Namely, after Donald Trump was elected under President Obama's leadership, there was an attempt to create a document that would become the basis for a years-long coup against President Trump, thus trying to undermine the will of the American people who sent him to the White House. In 2016,
we heard Tulsi again mentioned conspiracy, which allows participants to be prosecuted for a longer period after the crime is committed.
We will soon release these documents following the publication we made last week. I am very encouraged by the fact that whistleblowers are reaching out to us, professionals from the intelligence community who were there when it happened and who were outraged by it, and who are encouraged by the possibility and hope that the truth will come to light. And of course, the most important thing is for the American people to see that someone is held accountable. That is why we are handing over and have already sent all the documents we have, as well as any others we receive in the future, to the Department of Justice. To achieve this accountability, to ensure the integrity of our democratic republic, so that Americans can believe and trust that those they vote for in elections will truly be respected by those who are leaving office.
By the way, both Tulsi and Laura Trump are on the list of possible presidential candidates in 28. The leading pair today is Vance and Rubio, but these two are also serious candidates. Now let's think. Obama's defense will apparently say that neither he nor his people ever accused Trump of collusion. They had suspicions and were obligated to investigate. But that's a very weak defense given the number of documents that exist and their own correspondence. They thought everything was erased, that there was nothing left. So Sir Bannon suggests taking away the passports of everyone Tulsi accuses. Go to each of them at night with armed men, search their homes and offices, photograph them in handcuffs, and dress them in red prison uniforms. I would also add putting them in cages and parading them all over America as an example of what not to be. I have no doubt that all the documents presented by Tulsi as physical evidence are 100% genuine. But let's wait for the courts and their decisions. I hope we will live to see them. This is a blow to those who decided that the laws are for us, while they, the so-called untouchables, live by some other rules. But this is not a blow to the principles that allowed our country to slide into a situation where, in the United States, a class of public servants emerged who took and assumed everything, and according to the Constitution, they did it all. From our hands, they took power, our country, our rights. It is absolutely necessary to analyze what happened and find the sources of problems in our legislation, in our Constitution, and even to close all the loopholes that are found in the Constitution. A lot has happened in the more than 200 years of our country's existence. There is already a well-thought-out system created at the Los Angeles Institute of Free Enterprise in 1961-1989 by the brilliant astrophysicist and philosopher Andrei Joseph Galambas. I've already talked about him, which I discuss in a separate series of video programs. That is not here and now. There is a completely separate, different series of video programs. The link to this series, which is called Roadmap to Freedom, is below in the description. In addition, my book, co-authored with colleagues from the Institute, is called Capitalism. You can download it for free and get it as well. Every day you can receive a 10-minute story each day for 24 hours after you download the book about how to build a society, a community, a family in such a way that life becomes more interesting, fuller, and richer. Because clarity of mind gives precision and clarity to your actions. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen. There are these 2 footnotes in the description. Check them out. You won't regret it.